So today we are going to talk about, today for Asian allies, we're going to talk about silence is compliance and simple ways you can validate and support Asians. So what I'd like to do first is just kind of go over a quick little agenda. And the goal of this particular discussion is to define, well, what is silence? And who does that apply to? Who does it refer to? And the and how does it translate to violence? Because if you hear me, I will say silent to me, silence is violence. And so some people will say, oh, that's kind of a big jump. I don't understand that. So we're going to talk about that. And I'll give you an Asian perspective and many other Asian perspectives as well. And we're going to define, first of all, what are we talking about? So define the problem. A lot of nice, white, well-intentioned people in our neighborhoods um, see no problem. So that there is a problem. So we'll talk about that. And then I have a couple scenarios to share with you and stories of other Asians because I am one Asian. And then we will wrap up with some progress, which is good to see once in a while. And go ahead and use the chat. So silence is compliance. So first of all, you can't solve a problem if you can't see it and you don't understand it. So I think all of you know here, but 1 in 5 Asians experienced a hate incident in the last 2 years. And this is actually an old stat from last year, but 1 in 5, that's kind of a lot. And that's only the Asians who said that happened to them. And in the Asian culture, and I'm going to speak from the East Asian culture, that, it's not in our manner, even though I'm 4th generation, so I'm very Americanized, it's still, I'm not one to complain or say I have this problem. And a lot of, East Asians for sure don't like to spotlight themselves. I am unique in that. I do want the spotlight. I'm a speaker, but I'm 4th generation. And so when you hear things like this 1 in 5, no, it's probably 1 in 2. And when you hear stats like that, it is much higher than the stat you hear. Some of you know that I keep track of the attacks on Asians. And so, because if people don't see it, which they don't, and they don't hear it on the news, nobody's talking about it, then it's like it's not happening. And behind me are the daily attacks. And I only put the brutal ones, lit on fire, stabbed, murdered, pushed on the subway, acid in the face. I put those ones up on the timeline. And I keep track on my website, jolenejang.com, attacks. And people do not want to see this. Neither do I. I do not want to see Asians being attacked who look like my relatives. That's not happy to me. But if we don't recognize it and don't see it, then we're never going to solve it. Also talk about the reasons Asians would say something about any kind of hate is if they almost died. Because that's a lot of times the only reason an Asian is going to speak up like this, because, oh my gosh, this happened to me, want to catch the person, but also we don't want other Asians to die. And so think about all the lesser brutal, less violent things that Asians are not saying, are not talking. And there are reasons why they are not talking. That is not what we're talking about tonight. We're not talking about Asian silence because that's a totally different thing. Wanted to define the whole stop Asian hate problem. This is her first time through all of this last 2 years. This was the first time for her to say anything about stop Asian hate, because she was at her breaking point. So I'd like to share this with you to help define what I'm talking about here.
All the pain that is going on right now, all the hate and the violence that's going on in the world right now, it just hurts so much. I feel helpless. I've never felt more scared, more sad, more angry, more helpless than ever since this whole pandemic and since all the violent crimes that have been happening in this world. I'm also lost for words, which as a writer, I usually can write no problems, but if there's anything that I can do, if there's a movement that I can join, if there's a group that I can be a part of to help bring a voice to the Asian community and to fight back, I am there.
Well, I guess it sounds like it's a cumulative kind of thing. And I think that's what happens. I think that when we talk about microaggressions, sometimes we've talked about death by 1,000 cuts. It's just this adding up. And then I think as we've talked about, Jolene, what can make it even worse is when people don't want to accept the fact that it's even happening. So then you get a lot of gaslighting, or you get denial, or people saying, "Oh no, it's just random. These random attacks. It's not like this systemic kind of problem. It's more of just these. Oh, that was just a crazy person. They want to diminish what's really going on." And then you get the added pressure of, well, should I say something or shouldn't I say something, or that kind of thing. And I think it just all really just tears people apart.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Han, go ahead.
Yeah, when the anti-Asian hate sentiment started becoming more and more mainstream media, some of the comments from neighbors definitely showed bias. It definitely showed that there was a lack of understanding of what was going on in terms of the bigger picture. And that's normal, because if you're not exposed to different cultures and to different ways of thinking, the understanding can be fairly narrow. So the comments I got that was very narrow was, oh, because the Black Lives Matter movement happened, now Asians need to hop on board. And, they need their time in the spotlight, right? It's like, that's very, very simplistic and so much to unpack there.
The spotlight. Yeah, it's so fun being a target.
Yeah. The other comment I got too is, why do you care? It wasn't you. They aren't your family members. Why does it matter to you? And then the other comments I would receive are, along the lines of, well, I don't know how to explain it. It was around identity and how people identify, and you're American, so you should just empathize with anyone that is being attacked and not just Asians. And so it's like it's kind of weird. It's like people trying to reason themselves out of either feeling bad or reason themselves. I don't know. I think people tried to have good intentions here in some way. Some of them, I would hope.
Well, I think you hit on something, Han, about not wanting to feel bad. I think that people are afraid, if they admit that the problem is really there, that somehow they might have some responsibility to actually do something about it. So if you can deny that it even exists, then, hey, I'm off the hook, right? It wasn't your family, it didn't happen to you. Oh, it was just this random person. I think that's part of it.
For sure.
And John, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was very interested in Kevin's comments right off the beginning. As soon as he started speaking, I thought to myself, oh yeah, the microaggression thing. And I have to say, it took me a while to come to grips with the idea that that's actually a real thing. And the way that I eventually explained it to myself is that it's, everybody walks through the world, and somebody cuts us off when we're driving, or somebody's aggressive in the grocery store. And so we have all these things that they're, as who said it? Maybe it was Hamlet, the slings and arrows of unkind fate. Stuff happens during the day. But eventually the way I explained it to myself was that what if all the slings and arrows came from the same direction?
Mm.
That would be different. That would be different. And that's the way that I've come to, I think, have at least intellectually, if not viscerally, an understanding of what the concept of microaggression is. And I have to say, at the same time, it took me years to get to the point where I didn't think of the term white privilege as very aggressive, as very insulting. And now I get it. It's not about me. It's about something larger and societal. But anyway, Kevin, thanks for bringing that up, because that was certainly the topic I was going to reach for.
Yeah,
And-
thank you.
And thank you, John, because I think that's why, John, one of the reasons you're powerful as an ally is because you are that, like you were that white man, like not too long ago. And you've learned and you can talk the language and educating with the neighbors or just sharing because you look like them, you act like them, you kind of were them, you're super nice also. And so that's why it's thank you for your contributions, because you do have a lot of that privilege and you're using it. So thank you. Olga, go ahead.
You guys covered a lot of it already about the why do you care doesn't affect you, problem. I've also been seeing that, like, in the last couple of years, just while discussing race-related problems with other white people, there's the sentiment like, it does not affect me, so why should I care? They don't think about their friends. They don't think about that one Black friend that they have, or that one Asian friend that they have. It's a big problem. And when you change the way you think, you can change a lot of things after that. And one of the interesting things, that coming from a country that was actually run by a communist regime, anything that I find interesting here in just this general, more white American mind frame, anything that involves like thinking for another person is considered like as a bad thing, like it's some communist thing, that's only what communists do. And I find that interesting, and it's just like, no, your friends, your neighbors, they also make up who you are as a person, and it's important, it's because the other side of it, like, with that whole if it doesn't affect me, why should I care? It boiled down to what makes up this big conglomerate called greed, and there's different faces of that,
Yeah. And thank you for bringing the perspective, being from another country, and you are kind of the people who are around you. So it does matter. So this is a person in my connection, Ricky. And so he actually moved out of the country. But he's a big football fan. And I'm going to read a couple of the highlighted things here. Why is it that I've been hesitant to speak out against the recent hate crimes against Asians? I defended Colin Kaepernick, and I hated the Niners at the time. So it's not like I'd ever shied away from speaking my mind. And yet I've tried not to get into this argument when it's affecting me closer than ever. Is it because I was raised exactly how the model minority was taught to react, to be quiet, to do our part, to contribute to the success of the USA, but not to step out of those lines? Is it because I'm worried that what I say may alienate me to those who see me as a good minority? Honestly, I'm not sure, but the fact is, I'm thinking about this is blanked up. Don't you think? Racism is racism. And so this guy, he's my age, super cool, and he does have a lot of Asian friends. And both Amy and him had saw my, I've been posting, posting. Hey, there's a problem here. Hey, friends, let's do something. We can do this. And so these are two Asians that shared. And it's that breaking point. Amy, breaking point, could not hold it back any longer. And understand why do Asians feel like this? Because they're made to feel like this also. So yes, culture, but yes, don't feel comfortable and do feel shut down. And I'm going to share an actress, Kathy. She's a boomer. So says it's taken me 2 weeks to make this post because, to be honest, I've been so trained to believe that my voice does not matter, that anything I share about my personal experience is too self-indulgent or taking up too much space. And I especially didn't want to experience the pain of having no one read it or respond. Yes, I can relate to that. I debated sharing about the complexity of emotions, those murders, talking about Atlanta, feelings that have been present for 14 months in cycles and waves for my entire lifetime, literally from the time I was a baby. You know, how do I share about how much resilience and self-affirmation and compassion for it takes me to simply exist as an Asian woman? So this gal, she is a bold actress woman, and but the roles that she gets, it's a really long actually post. It probably exceeded the limit of in all the acting things she gets. It's, you know, it's the prostitute and the maid and these things, um and this is a very bold person, and to see her say that and out loud was pretty big for me. And there are so many um parts of this that are so resonate. um okay. Okay, and then I wanted to share with you, you can't read this, but um so I am one Asian, and I'm a bold Asian. I'm,
Mhm.
you know, I was president of the National Speakers Association for the state of Washington for 3 years. I'm Spotlight. Hey, I'm on stage. Look at me again. So that's me. So, and I'm a quarter white. So, and I'm fourth generation. And so I don't know how Asian I am. Do I represent the rest? I better check that out because I think maybe I don't. And so I joined all the different Asian American groups, you know, with 12,000, 6,000, 5,000. Um, you know, you're Japanese if there's a group, and they do post like a lot of sushi and panda bears and stuff. But I introduced a few like um, things that I think are important about racial justice. So I have been very active on these groups to see, well, what are other Asians, what are they saying? How are they feeling? Um, and so I want to read to you the gist of this so you can see, oh, it is not only me who feels like, um, you know, like I'm alone in this. So this is the post. Hello, fellow Asians. I need a temperature check. It's been an exhausting week. Again, this is with Atlanta. I think one of the hardest things has been not hearing from white friends through this all and wondering, how do I let them know I need support from them? I was thinking of pitching this as an article somewhere, but first wanted to know if anybody else is experiencing this. Is this me, or is it widespread? Or did I just pick blank friends, like bad friends and oblivious friends, you know, or do I just come off too strong? And so there's a whole slew, both actually men, Asian men also sharing their thoughts, which I thought was really unusual because I don't hear Asian men um not until, you know, recently sharing like their feelings. So this cuts pretty deep. So a lot of them are yeah, I did a check, 30 white friends and 28 didn't hear the news about the spa shootings. um and just going through all these, it's like, yeah, you know, they just let me be alone, and like, you know, only my Jewish friend reached out to me, or only my Black friend reached out to me. And just a constant, this is a very common theme where nobody reached out to me. And for myself, I think there were 7 people over a few months who reached out to me. And actually it was people who I didn't you know, in my really outer outer group, who reached out to me, not my friends, you know. And and so I reading this, I'm like, oh, whew, you know, I am not alone. Because I thought, wow, my friend group, my network is so nice. They're they're out in the marches. and all of that. So, what's the deal? How this worked for me? For one of the presentations, I totaled up kind of like my network, of like 7,000 people. I used to be popular. And like in terms of, I'm the network, I'm the fun specialist, bringing fun and energy to events, and always like connecting people in person and dancing and on all the things. And so I have a big network. I went to South by Southwest, consumer electronics. I sold the camera stick and was a reporter, always popping around, adding some fun and interest. And so it's been disappointing to know that, then I had like 7 friends. But they're good friends, and I'm building a number of friends who I really respect their values, and that I don't know very well, which is in my Asian allies. And I am not the only person who's had a big network that now is very tiny. And so this letter, which is an Asian allies, there's a link to it. It's a article from Eric Toda, who's a Facebook executive, and he's done a lot of big things in his past and what he's doing. And this article talks about my people are dying in silence, and I'm here with a megaphone. And I was out with my megaphone on all my channels, nobody listening. And it's like I was just crying when I was reading this. It's actually kind of making me teary right now too. And what I did is I combed through this and I pulled out the thoughts that really stuck out, resonated with me. No sign of concern. I'm saying that I don't walk alone outside. When I used to do 5 miles a day for the last 10 years by myself at midnight and 5:30 in the morning. And now I don't walk alone. No sign of concern from anybody. And no one is paying attention. No big news outlets, no brands, no influencers, no hashtags, silence. And even now, one of the Asian allies, Talia, she was helping me look at different words, keywords, and still Stop Asian Hate. There's like nobody looking for that. Asian inclusion, no, nobody's looking for that. Even anti-racist, no, nobody's looking for that. And there's just such limited interest. It's not that we can't talking about Asians. There's just no one listening to us. The myth has turned other communities against us, as we have been inappropriately placed on a pedestal. Model minority, they don't complain, they're hard workers. You're up here, Black people are down here. So when we scream, and we're screaming at backs turns to us, and in case you haven't been paying attention, we have been speaking up the entire time, loud and clear. So I would say there's a small group of APIs that may be speaking up, and those are more advocates. Or so with tears in my eyes, I'm asking you to understand the gravity of my words. I'm asking the tech industry, that I've given so much of myself to for one thing. I don't just want you to care. I want you to act. Love me and my people as much as we loved you. Don't let us die in silence. So in terms of the Asian community, oh my goodness, this is like the biggest article I think there's ever been, because this is a full page article, and it just echoed what so many of us were thinking. So I'd like to hear from you, what you think, how do you react to this?
Well, I guess one thing I think about, because I'm always thinking about how do you get people to listen to the person with the megaphone and actually understand that this is going on. So I was just trying to think of what catches people's attention. How do you get people to empathize? It just sounds like there's got to be a lot of kind of brainstorming and strategy planning to get people, because they're so inundated with social media and trying to get the kids to school and trying to pay the rent and all this other stuff. How do we normalize it so that people are just always kind of talking about it, and it's always on the front burner, as opposed to, oh yeah, 6 months ago they had this special that I saw on Asian hate, and then there's nothing that follows it up. you know, there's a tendency, even for the media even does that, because what they'll do is, like, I remember there was a show that was hosted by Joyce Taylor from King 5, where I think she had like 6 or 7 episodes, and it was all about this diversity, racism, anti-race, and then there was nothing. 6 weeks, and then that was
Yeah.
a year and a half ago.
Yep.
You know, Kevin is reminding me of something from my own recent experience. I retired from the UW, but one of the things that I got involved in towards the end of my career was science outreach projects to Native American reservations around the Pacific Northwest. And, you know, it was very satisfying, you know, and enjoyable to go out to reservations, you know, in Colville, Warm Springs, whatever, and, you know, interact with all these kids. And eventually it occurred to me that the effort was all wasted. It's because we came there once a year. We weren't there, you know, every Thursday. We weren't putting the effort in so that with the durability. I mean, it was all the people who participated, including myself, very well intentioned, but it occurred to me that when we went to, you know, Inshalum, we must have looked like people from Mars. That, you know, we showed up once a year. We brought all these fun science things for people to work on, and then we went away. The other thing, and Karen had a comment about this a moment ago, was there are actually lots of really good and caring people who, because of their unawareness of white privilege, just don't know.
Yep.
And the last thing I'll say is that regarding the megaphone, which is kind of what started this all off, I'm reminded of the politics, I guess you could call it, of when the AIDS epidemic occurred in the late 70s and early 80s, and how there was this thing that Reagan couldn't even bring himself to say the word, what was it, AIDS or something like that, until like the second to last year of his second term. And one of the groups that I remember being really frustrated with at the time was this group called ACT UP, AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power. And they were really noisy and really loud, and they did a whole bunch of really obnoxious stunts. But as I thought about what they, you know, their work later on, it occurred to me that they actually kept a kind of a spotlight on the issue, and they created room for other less wild groups to move in and actually do something, you know, truly positive. And so I have to admit, having some tension over how big a megaphone are you going to yell through, but, you know, having someone out there a little bit farther than you on these issues, you don't even have to like them, but they may actually create space for you to move.
Yeah, thank you. It's like pricing. 3 prices. It's 100,000, 10,000, but today $99. So yes, that's what I see. All right, V and then Catherine.
John, maybe we need to act up for Asian hate, some kind of group. That'd be great. I think I just wanted to say, Jolene, you asked like what our reaction was to the article. My reaction was, it was just like so moving and just like hit me in the gut, I guess. And I think a lot of times I know other people, like you'll see something that has an emotional content and will immediately intellectualize it and start talking about it from an intellectual point of view and like strategy or whatever. And I think it's really important to just allow the emotional impact to hit us and to feel that, like to pause and to say, wow, you know, and just like feel it, let it wash over you and breathe with it. And because I think we need to grieve with the people who are hurting. I think as allies, we need to grieve with our Asian friends. And from that place of connection, then I think we're like more motivated to take action. I guess I'll just speak for myself. Like anytime I intellectualize a problem, it's easy for me to go, okay, well, I thought about that, now on to the next thing. But if I like really allow it into my heart and I really feel it, it's a lot harder to just move on to the next thing. So yeah, I guess that's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
I think it's good to feel some pain. I mean, I'm not an empath, but I do feel pain every time I see murders, but I feel like I need to see them because it's still there. And I can shut my eyes if I need a breather, and that's why I go outside, but it's still there. And I think, at least for me, people are different. Okay, this is still going on, and I'm gonna look at that violence and use it as juice, use it as energy and motivation that, okay, like we got to be more efficient. We got to keep figuring out different ways to move it along. Go ahead, Catherine.
I'm processing a lot of everything that you've shown and everything that people have said have really impacted me, and I tend to take a long time to process, so I don't often have a lot to say right away, but one thing that actually I think, Jolene, you said, basically with the image that's behind you, like people aren't following like Stop Asian Hate or anything around that, and I realized like this was one of the things that when we were in that webinar, which I finally found in my brain together, and you were posting, something that lit up in my brain was like, I'm doing a lot of anti-racist work, but mostly around Black people, and I really want to learn more about how I can be an ally to Asian people. So like I haven't followed any of those hashtags, and I'm going to get off this call and I'm going to go do that. Like that's my commitment. So I'm just appreciating being here and starting this allyship journey too.
Well, thank you. And there are witnesses who just heard you. Yay!
Yeah.
and we wouldn't know all the things I know. I just learned also in the last whatevers. And, I don't, right? I mean, there's so many things we need to know. And also as an East Asian and as a middle-class Asian, I have a lot to learn about the other cultures and the Pacific Islanders and different income levels. And it's a different ballpark out there. So we're all learning together.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. Olga.
This is actually to Catherine. Start with reading books. I mean, we have a list in the group of the Asian Allies book program. Definitely check that out. Start reading books and especially the history. And you have to be okay with reading the stuff that you are not going to want to hear. And start there. And yeah, like I said, we have a book list, and it's still stuff that I still need to add on and stuff, but it's constantly being worked on. There's a lot of great titles there.
I love how this is going. Thanks for participating. I'm an Asian ally who's a great friend now, and I really didn't know him. I knew him for 15 years. So I was very active in the National Speakers Association. And now, it's like I was speaking to him like 3 times a week. And he sent this to me. He's a white professor, 68-year-old, and he sent this to me. And I took the Sir Anthony Hopkins speech letter, and I took the things that resonated with me, and I wanted to share this particularly with Asians, but I think during COVID this is pretty relatable. The truth is that you're not for everyone. Stop hard conversations with people who don't want to change. Stop showing up for people who are indifferent to your presence. Decide you deserve a true friendship. Yes. And when I saw this, I was just crying. I'm like, oh my gosh, it was written just for me. And I shared this with other Asians. I mean, this is just like, oh my gosh, wow. when you are forgotten or easily ignored by people you give to, you don't do yourself any favor by allowing them your energy and your life. You're starting to realize that the most important thing you can do for your life, for yourself, and for everyone you know is protect your energy stronger than anything. Turn your life into a safe sanctuary where only compatible people with you are allowed. So that is just spot on for me. And right now, the last line that you're compatible with, when I feel more supported and more confident, then I want to interact with people, you know, definitely who are opposite of me and try and understand, oh my gosh, where are you coming from? But at this point, I want white people to do that. So right now I need to be in my safe places where I'm not going to be attacked all the time. So, and how, stop hard conversations with people who don't want to change. I want you all to do this if you can. I don't want to do this right now. I can't. You know, it's like that's too much. And decide you deserve true friendship. So I'm getting a little teary right now, but I don't want to be, when people are gonna cut me up, both literally or figuratively, I want to know that somebody's gonna say, hey, no, you know, they're going to do something. And I do not feel like that's what I have with my pre-COVID network. And there are so many other Asians that feel the same way. They're not going to be outright, you know, in public saying this like I am, but it's out there. And if you stop trying, the relationship might stop. If you stop texting, your phone stays dark for days and weeks. That doesn't mean you're ruined a friendship. That means all the relationship was the energy that you put into it. So you know, my background is a fun specialist and I host at my house. Hey, let's go to karaoke. Let's go swing dancing. Let's go hip hop dancing. Let's go here. Let's come to my house. I'm the connecting always. And I'm hosting, I'm inviting, I'm posting, and I'm the person. Well, guess what? I don't do that anymore. And guess what? Nothing's coming back to me. So that's so sad, but I'm so glad that I learned that. And without the different events and politicians and everything, this wouldn't have happened. And I may be in a situation where I thought I had good friends, and yet, oh my God, somebody just raped me right in front of a bunch of people. So it's like, it's really knowing who's there for you. This is a fun portion of the program. Right. Okay, so that gets to gaslighting. So we know the problem. So Stop Asian Hate, we're targeted and it's a problem and people don't know about it. And so you get a sense of how Asians are feeling about this. And the types of things that we hear are, oh, you're fine. You can walk fine. Why? I feel fine. You know, my blonde, blue-eyed, you know, athletic guy, I'm fine. Yeah, you are. Like, it's a different perspective. And also it's like, not only do I hear of all of the violence around me and across the nation, you know, my aunt was followed from my house in the suburbs here in my nice house, to her house. She had to drive over to my parents' house to try and shake them and then go back to her house. And she's, you know, she's 70 something. Right. And it's not just normal car, like really bizarre. That was like 2 years ago. My dad, he was Uber driving as he's retired, and 3 white dudes were like, I'm going to kill you, you know? And it's like, oh, that's not pleasant. And my dad did go to the cops. They're like, what do you want us to do about it? And then there's a number of people in the neighborhood in Shoreline and Linwood and all around that there was 3 who've had cars driven at them. And so I think people think that all these crimes and things are just in Chinatown. And so what people, in terms of gaslighting, oh, they probably were just looking at their phone. You know, it probably was, maybe they sneezed. So there's all these excuses. And then when I had the guy, I was walking to my parents' house to feed the chickens. it's really residential. And this guy stopped his car. Luckily, there was one car with him, like behind him, and there was like a crossing guard or something, or I don't know, some person. And he was kind of far away from me. So I was like, oh, is this what's happening? He was like, hey, looking good. I love you. And I'm in this slumpy, you know, big sweatshirt, sweats on. I'm surprised you can tell I was a female. But he was out and he was way out of his car, and not cool. And I wasn't so scared. I wasn't scared because I was like, oh, is this happening? I know that there's a person in the car behind him, and then there's that person, and I can run. I'm 50 feet away. So I wasn't concerned for my safety because of this, but if there was nobody there, I might just head the other direction kind of fast, just in case. But then you have my best friend, who still is. Oh, that's just part of being a woman. I get cat calls all the time. I go to Green Lake, and that's just part of it. And also my father was like, nah, it's no big deal. Yeah, it is. And if I got cat calls, I don't think I've ever got a cat call. Even when I'm looking good, I can look really good. Um, and going to the clubs, whatever, long time ago, I still didn't get cat calls. So it's a different sort of thing. So when people tell me how I'm feeling, no, you don't know what it's like to be a Japanese, Chinese, Swedish, Asian woman in this area right now. And so gaslighting is like making you think that it's your problem, like you are wrong and you're exaggerating. So that's not cool. And then my best friend, who is no longer my best friend, oh, you're angry. Just turn off the news. I think you should see you should go to a therapist because you're really
That
angry.
will eliminate the problem. Just don't watch it on TV and it disappears, right?
It goes away.
Like cancer, just don't look at anything, read anything about cancer, and it'll disappear.
Yeah, it's gone.
I think the gaslighting takes many forms. I was waiting for you to say the thing about, well, you're a woman, so you're supposed to put up with that. I've had people say, well, how'd you know it was racist? And because the person didn't call you a name, but people can still behave in a certain way. Whereas if you hadn't been Asian, I think the Asian part probably played a part in his hostility. It's not always so overt like that. I mean, it can be very, very subtle, the microaggressions or the bias or the, whatever. I mean, even the enthusiasm or lack of enthusiasm with how somebody treats you when you come into a business. No, I can't single it out like, well, he treated me this way, like he didn't give a what, because I was African American. The only way I could prove that is if a white person came in and then he was super nice. But a lot of times you walk out kind of going, was that what I thought it was? And then you have somebody come along and say, oh, no, it's not that. It's just that you were looking good that day, Jolene. You have to tolerate that for some reason.
Yep. John?
Yeah, I think the most painful example of gaslighting that I've ever heard, and it has stuck with me for decades. It was something that Jesse Jackson once said. He remarked, obviously, with a certain amount of anguish, that there was a time in his life when if he was walking down a street at night and a black man was approaching him the other way, he would cross the street. And, just all I can say is that has really stuck with me. We really did a number on him for him to feel that way.
So I'm now going to give you a couple of examples in our neighborhood. So this, and John saw what I did. So John, who just spoke, I asked him to post in Nextdoor. Nextdoor is a big online community, which I hardly am on anymore. Because he does pancake breakfasts and he's just a nice neighborly guy. And so I asked him to post some of the programs that we were doing and actually presentations coming from his voice, because I didn't I wanted no more of silence, but also just yucky things. So this isn't Asian hate. Stray bullets are not a hate crime. Drop the false hate crimes. That's BS. What about the white people getting shot? You hear anyone calling that a hate crime? Actually, all crime, so just lots of gaslighting where they dismiss the real problem. And then there was I think it was Iranian guy shot 10 white people in Colorado, or I think, and they're like, oh, we should return the favor. We should kill him or kill his people. And so these are my neighbors, by the way. Kevin, these are your neighbors too. So, and here exactly what insidious assault on our Asian neighbors are referring to, because there certainly hasn't been any in Lake Forest Park. My wife and in-laws are Chinese American. One of our neighbors is Vietnamese American, another is Indian. We live in Lake Forest Park for 20 years and can't recall a single incident of anti-Asian behavior in all that time. So this is a white man claiming that there has been nothing in Lake Forest Park, and he's in proximity to these other Asians. So there is nothing out there.
Well, what is the population of Lake Forest Park and compared to the population of the United States of America?
Yeah. I think there's 10,000. Yeah. And also,
what happens in Lake Forest Park is what's happening on the rest of the planet. Apparently.
It's so ridiculous for the white man, this husband, to claim he knows what it's like to be an Asian. And this lady, Linda, is always very active. Stop white hate. So everything I put out there, if any Asian says anything out there, it's always something.
Yeah.
And nobody is oppressing anyone in your neighborhood. Your television is brainwashing you to feel guilt for the things you are not responsible for. If you are afraid to walk around in your neighborhood, they've been brainwashed too. Turn off your TV. And so this was, I think John posted something for me. And then, so I'm the crazy person who's brainwashed. So this just goes on and on. And a couple, let's see. Oh yeah. Okay. I want to share this one. Awareness doesn't do much for me. All I can say to anyone is just don't bring harm to anyone. You're doing your part by not harming others, which is, no, you're part of the problem if you were doing nothing. And so, because there are plenty of people who are like, no, I'm nice to everybody and I treat everybody the same. Not. And again, so gaslighting, what we say, what say we drop? Oh, let's say we drop all the labels and just be Americans, follow the golden rule and just treat everyone as you prefer to be treated.
All right, Jolene, I can't take it anymore. I can't take any more of this gaslighting. It's got my blood pressure going up. That was too many examples. All I want to say is, one word was the key word you said was nothing. That's a very key word, because you're enabling the status quo to continue. As you were talking, it was reminding me of the civil rights movement of the 60s, with Rosa Parks and people actually doing something to ignite change. So if people back in the Deep South during segregation said, well, I'm nice to everyone. I'm nice to the Black people that have to go use the bathroom and the restaurant for the Black people, nothing would have happened. You actually have to do something. You have to call it out. You've got to protest. You've got to boycott. Maybe you boycott something. Maybe you donate to a certain charity, but it's actually taking action. Just being nice doesn't change anything. Just makes you feel guilt-free, I suppose.
Yeah, so you can feel the pain because this goes on all day long. So I'm not really online because I can't stand this. It's so ridiculous. But I want you all to wade in this and get in here because I would like it to be a safe place to be there.
At the risk of making Kevin feel even worse, there's another example that I can think of, and this is from back in the 80s during the Reagan presidency. and Nancy Reagan was being interviewed by somebody, and the topic of poverty in America came up. And
wow.
yeah, maybe Kevin knows where this is
I
going.
think I've heard, I don't know the exact quote, but go ahead and say it because I've heard it.
And she said that Nancy Reagan said that she doubted that there was much poverty in America because she had hundreds of friends and none of them were poor.
Oh, see, comedy is here.
Well,
So
that's like a joke. I mean, you kind of go, okay, that's a joke from SNL, right?
Yeah.
No, she actually meant that. That's what's scary.
Yep. So we've defined the problem, stop Asian hate, and gaslighting. So toxic positivity, because and my programs, when I do my presentations, it is, I'm not trying to go far right to try and convince people to be nice or whatever. That's not, I'm going to trying to get the people who are the nice, well-intentioned, who don't know. So toxic positivity. So this is an example in Kenmore, where there was a South Asian. So it was an Indian lady, and her babysitter's Indian was yelled at, "Hey, go back to your country." And to me, I'm like, yeah, that's all day long. Not to, that's like, so to me, it's not like it's not a big deal, but like, I'm more concerned about people getting murdered. But so there were like 330 people on this post. And so again, toxic positivity. Oh, that was just one crazy person. They were probably on drugs, and you'll be fine. You're safe here. I've lived here my whole life, as a white woman, and it's always been fine. Our neighbors are so great. So that was just an anomaly. And you have all the people saying, just like, it's not a problem for them. Right? It's not a problem for them, but we want to be concerned about the person who says it is a problem. And so also the idea, like, hey, I stand with you. Well, where are you standing? What are you doing? How are you taking action? And I take offense to that, because I'm like, because I reached out to one person who I don't know very well, but in my National Speakers Association, I'm like, okay, well, here's a meeting. Or here, you want to show this post? Like, what does it mean to stand with me? Like, it could mean they mean that, but you need to show some action saying you stand with me. Keep showing up. Then you can say that and then continue to share and like and comment. But I want some action. So when you see these posts out there with something bad that happened and people are just blaming it on a crazy person, and I've never seen that, and I can't believe that we have the best place that is also gaslighting and toxic positivity. Not helpful.
Well, again, you hit the nail on the head when you say you're standing with me. Standing with me is what, like, the Freedom Riders did and got on the bus and got yelled at and arrested. And I'm not saying that should happen to people. I'm just saying, again, it just goes to action. That's very figurative. I'm standing with, well, what do you mean? I'm standing, I support you. Well, how are you supporting me? It's like if you were living on the street, Jolene, in a tent, and I said, well, Jolene, I feel your pain and I support you. Well, give me some money and give me a house or something. Isn't that your next response to that? And then it's performative is what it is. And I think it really just makes the person feel not accountable and feel better. Oh yeah, I agree with you. Okay, so it's like, I agree that you should not have to live in a tent. Well, so what are you going to do about it, though?
Yep, exactly. So performative actions, not that helpful, but I think let's share a little bit about this, how Kevin and you and I, so Kevin and I talk about, we have a show called Black and Asian Perspectives. And so we can share our middle class suburban backgrounds of Black and Asian. And so performative actions, I get no actions, I get silence. So I am super happy if anybody acknowledged me in any kind of format, a like, a wink, any kind of anything. I mean, I was trying to get people to do the frames that I created, a Stop Asian Hate frame, because people don't know about it. And like, oh, why do you care about that? Then they could start sharing. So performative, for Asians, the bar is really, really low. So, but Black folks have been in this fight, like actively vocal and working on things for a long time. And so performative, how do you feel about performative actions?
How do I feel about it?
Yeah, I mean, like, because
I
you know how.
well, it's kind of, I don't know. It's kind of like you eat a meal and you're hungry 5 minutes later. I mean, it on the surface it looks good, but again, it's it's the old cliche of action speaks louder than words. I mean, you can say anything, but I think that what happens sometimes too is that as soon as you bring something up, people want to say, well, that's political. I don't. It's just like with Colin Kaepernick at the football game. Well, I want to keep politics out of my football game. I'm thinking you're talking about police brutality. What's that got to do with politics? Or me, or talking about taxes and things like that you see in presidential debates, not whether or not somebody should be beaten over the head or drug out of a car or racially profiled. That's what Colin Kaepernick was trying to bring attention to. Is that politics? But I think the other thing is that people need to realize, I always tell people, find your lane. You don't have to, a young white woman said to me one time a couple of years ago, she said, well, I want to do something, but I don't feel comfortable getting out and marching with a Black Lives Matter sign. I said, well, there's all kinds of other things you can do. It's like any cause. You can run in a 10K, or you can donate $100 toward the cause. You can read a book. You can form a book club. You can frequent, next time, instead of going to Safeway, go to Chinatown and get to know the people down there. It doesn't have to be that you have to go out and walk 5 miles in the rain, but you can do something. Just saying I'm being nice to people. Yeah, that's good. You should be nice to people. That's just it, right? You shouldn't be racist. He said, well, I'm not a racist. It's like, well, it's a big deal. Well, you shouldn't be racist, really.
Yeah. So with performative, it's like, for Asians, and I think a lot of Asians, well, we'd like more, but like, at least I like bottom barrel. Anything is something. And so just be aware that we would like you to do something, but try and do something more. So, go ahead, Kevin.
Well, no, I mean, I'm just kind of, concurring with you.
Yeah.
I think that, I think sometimes people get tripped up by awkwardness. They'll want to say something, or something happens and maybe they want to acknowledge something about the Atlanta spa murders, or Black Lives Matter, or George Floyd, or whatever. I've known my friends tend to be people like you, Jolene, who are already in the active group, but there are also people that I know that, and not all are white, but for the most part, they hadn't said a word to me in 2.5 years after George Floyd and all that stuff. And these are people that I see on a regular. They don't want to bring it up, I don't think. Yep. Because they don't want to, so they don't say anything. So then they come across like they don't really care. Or they talk amongst themselves and say really dumb things because they're in an echo chamber.
Yep. And I think that brings me to right here. A good segue. Right here. So I'm going to lean. So we're to the silence part. If you're neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. If an elephant has its foot on the tail of a mouse and you say that you are neutral, that mouse will not appreciate your neutrality. Desmond Tutu. And a lot of Asians and myself feel this way. And maybe Asians won't, if you ask them, they may not tell you. But guess what? Pretty sure they feel that way. But they don't feel comfortable.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's like, I think sometimes people will fall back on this, another excuse of like, well, they should have said something.
Yep.
Well, how many times do you in your own relationships with your kids, your partner, your spouse, your coworkers, people have left a lot of things unsaid. I mean, people quit jobs and then they do exit interviews and then they spew out all kinds of stuff about how they've hated working there and this and that. And you say, well, why do you say it? So the idea that people don't say anything is not an excuse to pretend like something doesn't exist, especially if culturally speaking, there's a tendency to be like that, because it's like men wanting to go see a counselor. A lot of men can be ready to jump off a bridge, but the last thing they want to do is go talk to a counselor about their problems, because we're conditioned to be strong and stoic and problem solve. Doesn't mean we're not ready to tear our hair out or do something. I mean, you see it play out in so many ways on the news. That's what happened to me. I had a big afro 2 weeks ago.
Desmond too, also.
Desmond pulled his hair out.
Silence is compliance and silence is violence. I really stick to that. But let me say, when I thought about that a month ago, I'm like, well, silence, not for Asians. Silence is compliance for white people. Because white people have the power and they look like all the rest of the people. Asians, they gotta survive, right? And Black people have their own problems too, and all the other marginalized groups. But white people are in the majority. And so when I say silence is violence, silence is compliance, I'm really talking to white people. These are the folks who really can make a big difference easier, less obstacles in the way. Anyway, so there's a lot of white people. The US is 60% white and 6% Asian. And so white folks, we really need you to step up. So you
mentioned the word power too. People in positions, if you have people in power, they have more influence and they have more the power to make things bad or good. Whereas if you don't have that power, you can be very vocal, but it doesn't go anywhere.
But also to add to that, if you are white and feel like you don't have any power, you still have more power than another of other folks of people of color. So you have less obstacles, and it's just go on about that. So here, this is a local group, and this is a pastor who wrote this up. So the idea to try and explain not doing anything. So you're on a boat flowing south, but you want to go north. But if you don't actively and intentionally motor, then you will move farther and farther away of where you're trying to go. The river is the system constantly flowing towards racial hate, oppression, and death. That's why racism is systemic. If we do not intentionally work against racism, we contribute to the problem. So we need anti-racists to swim upstream, to paddle, you have to be active to be able to help.
Hey, I have to leave, unfortunately. This has been great.
Yes, thanks for sharing, Kevin.
Well, sure. And I love meeting Catherine. Great to see you, Olga, and let's see who else is on the pond. And of course, Mother Jang, V. I'll see you all later. And I'll talk to you on Friday, Jolene.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kevin.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Jamie Honey, I met an Australian stuntman in Japan. And so this is kind of what he wrote up, kind of taking some ideas from what other people have written and kind of putting it together. Everyone is in the ocean. We all have our ups and downs. Not everyone is in the same size boat. If you're a white male, you're in the biggest ship. If you're a female, your ship is half that size. If you're any other race besides white, you may not have a boat, maybe just a flotation device. So if you're not drowning, then you can help. So, because I think a lot of people have a hard time really understanding, well, I'm struggling too. Yes, but we have different starting points and we have different equipment. I posted this, and this isn't even Asian, right? What if white people were the slaves and there's a Black person was in charge? And here, what if the white people were doing the Vietnamese nail stuff? And it's not even Asian. So I get 7 likes. And then over here, my white male friend gets 71 likes, 41 comments, and 14 shares. And it's just like the example is, I have lots of examples of this. Yeah, we're not the same. It's not apples to oranges, but every time if somebody else shares the same thing, it gets much different response. So to really understand your power and ways to To support Asians is to listen. The best way is to listen and then validate. Oh, I hear you. Oh, is that right? And like, oh, I didn't know that, and you can say, oh, that's terrible. Um, but it's just listen, because if you dismiss it and try and like, oh, it'll get better. No, it will not get better. Like, you don't know that. That's out of your control. And that's a reason why an Asian may not share with anybody, unless except for other Asians who may understand, because we don't want to be shut down. And so, oh, I'm a person who's not there. Okay. Sorry. Oh, today. Woo. Okay. So what a number of Asian allies have done is when I post something, they like it, make a comment, share it. Olga does a beautiful job when I share something to read it, watch it, and then make comments from her perspective. So she's bringing it to life from her perspective. And it's so glorious to have all sorts of different perspectives. And really, like, as an Asian, again, I'm used to silence. So any kind of crumb, I mean, I deserve more. I do, but I will take a crumb right now, um, until, until I can get more. So anyways, what are your thoughts on what we just discussed? Yeah, Catherine.
I was just going to start speaking, but then realized we've been raising hands. I was just in terms of that, the like post amplification,
Yeah.
that's, I think I'm mentioned the like messaging groups that are happening on LinkedIn, and then so the amplification group that I've created and haven't quite launched yet, but that's exactly what that's for, and like is to make sure that especially as white people, that we're amplifying, because LinkedIn is and Facebook. LinkedIn is where I kind of live, not so much Facebook, but I do pay attention. But even the algorithms and stuff, right? Like especially if we're not following hashtags or things like that, but even more so, like we were able to get a Black woman who had been kicked off of LinkedIn for a month. We were able to basically get her, like she shared her post that got her kicked off, and a whole bunch of us shared it. So like there's this movement happening and on LinkedIn. So I really want to bring you into that too, and other Asian people. So I guess I'm feeling some excitement that I can help and take actions, right?
Yes.
And that I've come here. And the other piece that comes up for me is like, I'm one of those like white women, especially like with disabilities and PTSD and stuff, that have had to do a lot of work to get to a point where I could do this anti-racism. But like, I am so grateful that I've done that, so I can be here, right? So I can actually exercise like the privilege and the power that I have to be able to share it with people who don't hold that. And I'm speaking as a disabled woman too, a disabled white woman, right? So that's like, I know that there are people out there who like don't even struggle with disabilities or anything, right? And that could speak even like louder, and maybe don't have to deal with the same kind of energy barriers that I do, in terms of like, dealing with everything that's going on in my body and brain. So thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing me into those groups. And it's validation. It's tough.
Yeah.
I haven't been as active because I'm just like,
yeah.
So go ahead, Han.
Can you all hear me all right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm cooking, so I'm not able to participate much, but I have a break here. I wanted to acknowledge what Catherine said about being disabled. I think there is something behind having empathy and having a struggle at all, right? It makes you more capable of having empathy towards others. And I think you brought up a good point, like, where are all the other white women? It just because you were focusing on white women, where are they in this movement? And I think it's just that they don't care because there's a lack of empathy. There's a lack of that lived experience of having gone through a struggle like disabilities, a struggle like being part of the LGBTQIA plus community, for example, right? So I think that because you have disabilities, it does open you up to the opportunity to be more empathetic.
Agreed. And watching that Crip Camp, I'm such a big fan of the Netflix Crip Camp, talking about the 1970s, this camp kind of Burning Man, like Woodstock, freedom for people with disabilities. It was so, I think, so relatable. I'm able-bodied, but just so relatable in so many ways. And I think probably people who were like teased because they were, I don't know, short or whatever, they probably could, I don't know, maybe they could relate to. And I think any kind of marginalized group have ways of such a good show. So silence is compliance. I hope I made that clear, and understand that a lot of Asians, even though they probably won't tell you how they're feeling, Han is very active and an advocate, but like people outside of advocates, like you'd be hard pressed to get a feeling answer, because they don't know if you care and what are you going to do about it. And it's awkward. Everybody feels awkward, including them. And it wasn't worth it. So silence is a problem. So get active. And and validation is such a big deal, at least on my list. Validation that I exist, that you see me, that you hear me. And there's a number of Asian allies who do a great job with that. So I'm just going to wrap up here with a couple of exciting things on the Hollywood front. I think Hollywood is, or shows, I guess, maybe not movies so much. Well, there's a couple things going on. So I'm in Asian Allies, and there is a show called Netflix Partner Track. So talking about sexism and racism in big law. So that's kind of a big deal, starring this Korean American. So I don't know much about it. I just heard about it today. So I'm thrilled to see that. And then there was another, so Christopher, he's a photographer and a prolific writer, and he has a channel. And so I'm really excited to read his article about 3-dimensional portrayals of women of color, but only if they have white male love interests. So he talks about a lot of different shows, because Netflix has a lot. I think Prime has a bit too. And I love this show, Never Have I Ever. And he talks about all the different shows on there. So it's great to see a lot of representation. For example, like Never Have I Ever, it's a South Asian lead. She's hilariously funny. She's crass. She's smart. She's a problem. I mean, like, she's just a handful, and it's so funny. And then the lead, who's the stud, who's like the big man on campus, he's Japanese and white. But he is, like, Japanese people, I think we know that he's Hapa, but like white people may not know, oh, he's Asian. And so he's like the really cool guy, but he's white passing. So Christopher is saying, well, and same with Crazy Rich Asians, the really good looking guy lead, who's suave and just beautiful, Henry Golding. He's half also. I think he's half Malaysian, or and so it's like, okay, well, we're starring Asians, but they're still whitish. So and how I see that is, hey, getting closer. We're getting closer. So there's a lot more presentation coming up, and that's because Asians are pushing hard, who are in at Netflix and in different positions. So yay. So that's positive. Well, thank you all for being here. My plan is to put a calendar out of some of these topics so you can pick and choose. Like, okay, I can go to one a month. Here's what it is, and I liked tonight how it wasn't me just talking. I don't really ever want to have me just talking unless I'm doing a presentation and I studied and I practiced and I'm scripted or something. So I thought this is great. I would like all of them to be a little bit more like this. And I do want to have more Asians, sharing so then you can hear from other voices. And so that is the plan. We're constantly moving these. So, I hope you all have some action items. I know, Catherine, you're going to plug me into LinkedIn. Um, yeah, so I hope you have some action items. And okay, Olga.
Not really an action item, but to kind of add to like some of the things that you're excited about, especially the involving Hollywood.
Yeah.
So I just found out that one of my favorite books, The Downstairs Girl by Stacey Lee, is being made into a miniseries.
Oh,
And so I'm super excited about that. I still have to look into like when the production's gonna start and all that stuff. But it's gonna be going through some streaming service I've never heard about. It's some like Bound or something like that. But I will post info about it. So it's
well,
a really
great.
cool. It's a cool story. It is geared for young adults, of course, but an adult can read it too. YA books and adult fiction stuff, they're very interchangeable. Anyway, but it's about this a Chinese American gal in the South in early 1900s. And I don't want to spill too much other than that, but the story basically, Stacey Lee describes of like what happened in the after the Reconstruction, once all the black slaves became freed and everything, and how there was this like big push to bring in like mainly Chinese Americans or Chinese, from China, to do basically the work that the former slaves did. And it's really like this part of unknown history. So it's largely talking about that through this young teenage Chinese American gal who is also very feminist. So there's a lot of girl power in there, and there's also kind of a twist in the story too. I don't want to spill
Okay.
too much, but I'm super excited about that.
Well, great. Yeah. Thank you for that. I didn't know about that. Well, thank you everybody for being here. I'm excited. This is like and Catherine's like, this is like such a great, this is like such a good, happy, safe place where we can learn together. So thank you all for being here. Thanks, Mom. Thanks for standing also. All right. See you later. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks.